Will do. With that, I'll yield back and thank the gentleman for the time.
The gentleman's time's expired. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I reserve my time.
The gentleman from Virginia reserves. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
I'm pleased now to recognize the senior member of the committee, Jerry Nadler of New York, for 2 minutes.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Chairman, I rise to support the Conyers-Watt substitute. Unlike the underlying bill, the substitute takes effective steps to address the patent troll problem without including the unnecessary and dangerous so-called tort reform provisions. The substitute, like the bill, includes provisions providing customer stay exceptions, raising awareness in the small business community as to their rights when confronted with patent trolls, and increasing transparency of patents and the companies that own them. The substitute takes additional steps to address the problem. It includes a study of how to address bad faith demand letters, which are scaring retailers and others into settling claims based on convenience as opposed to merit. And very importantly, the substitute does not include the loser pays provisions of the underlying bill. Loser pays laws have a chilling effect on justice. They would deter legitimate patent owners with meritorious claims from pursuing justice. In this country, the general rule is that each side in a legal proceeding pays its own attorney's fees and costs. Most of the statutory exceptions that Congress has enacted have been geared towards encouraging private litigation to implement good public policy. Awards of attorney's fees are often designed to help to equalize disputes between private individual plaintiffs and corporate or government defendants. Thus, attorney's fees provisions are most often found in civil rights, environmental protection, and consumer protection statutes. The provision in this bill differs from other congressional exceptions in that it would require anyone who loses a patent claim to pay the attorney's fees of even large corporate defendants. This is a giant deterrent to genuine inventors from filing good faith suits to defend their valid patent claims. Therefore, I urge the adoption of the Watt-Conyers substitute, which would drop the loser pays provisions from the underlying bill while still including the key reforms that are present in the underlying bill and in the Senate bill drafted by Senator Leahy. I urge adoption of the substitute, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New York yields back. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, at this time I am pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from California, who has been a great person to work with on the Judiciary Committee and here on the floor of the House on this legislation. The gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lofgren.
The gentlewoman from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. I appreciate the time. And earlier in the debate, I jumped ahead of myself and addressed the issue of pleadings and discovery costs during the Watt Amendment about fee shifting. So I'll focus on fee shifting now. The provision in the bill is absolutely right on. I oppose the English rule generally, but we have created dozens of times instances where the losing party can pay, and let me just read the language. The courts will shift the costs and fees to a non-prevailing party unless the party's position is reasonably justified in fact or law, or the fee award would cause economic harm. The discretion is still with the judicial officer to avoid harm. In terms of what should be in the bill, I mentioned at the outset that I don't believe this bill is perfect. If it were up to me, the bill would also exempt PTO users' fees from sequestration. It would clarify the scope of prior art in the grace period. It would allow the PTO to continue using its BRI standard in post-grant and inter-party review. I hope that the Senate will address those issues. Certainly the the amendment by Mr. Watt and Mr. Conyers does not. It pains me when I have to disagree with my ranking member, who I admire so very much, but I do disagree with this amendment. I think it will absolutely gut the bill, and I intend to vote against it, and I hope that others join me, and I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from Virginia reserves. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
I recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Johnson, for 1.5 minutes.
The gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
There he is.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of the Conyers-Watt substitute amendment. And And I must say that this has been a very spirited debate here today, but I would be remiss not to come back to speak on the issue of an inventor such as Dennis Ross, a venture capitalist, an example of the type of person that this bill should protect. Danny co-founded a company, a tech company down in Atlanta that employed more than 100 people and reached more than half the internet audience at its peak. He owned several patents based on great inventions, and he's got a startup, had the good patents, patent office reviewed and affirmed these patents, but not only were these strong patents, they were also sought after by several companies, but rather than pay Danny for his innovation and hard work, these companies refused to license his patent. This practice is common for large companies that would rather bully someone in court than license their patents. We are an innovation economy. The drive to create and tinker is what motivates Americans to innovate. Those innovations should be rewarded, and those innovators should be rewarded for their labor and contribution to society. That's the whole point of the patent system. But if this bill becomes law, patent owners and inventors will be unable to enforce their patents without risking personal bankruptcy. I've long supported reform and am a friend of the innovation economy, but today I call on my colleagues to support this amendment. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Marino, the Vice Chairman of the Courts, the Internet and Intellectual Property Subcommittee.
Gentleman from gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I oppose this substitute, and I explain why and why I support the Goodlatte Bill 3309. This bill has been methodically drafted with abundant openness and clarity. Among other parts of this bill, which there are many, two are extremely important that I see. One is that it protects small business owners, entrepreneurs, young men and women who could lose their business or could lose their idea. Young men and women that may even be visiting the Capitol today. I want to explain what a troll does. A troll doesn't go after primarily larger companies. They go after upstarts. They go after young people who are starting to make a profit after years of work. And they send them a letter and say, pay me X amount of dollars, 10, 20, 50,000, and I won't sue you. And if I do sue you, we'll go to court and you'll probably go bankrupt because it's going to cost you that much. They're suing people based on using a phone, a scanner, and a copier with which they purchased. They have no interest in the software, but yet they're being sued for that. This is good law. We have to get over the fact that it is a fact that the trolls are really taking advantage here. I see my time has run out, but it's really going to cut the cost of litigation and get owners to the court on time, and I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized. The gentleman from Michigan has 1 minute remaining.
I'm pleased to yield the balance of my time to the distinguished gentleman from California, Mr. Rohrbacher.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
So we keep hearing about the trolls, and yes, there is some problem with the trolls, and sometimes it hurts middle-class people, but we can solve that problem without destroying the rights of our American independent inventors. And they are pleading with us. People, interest groups around the country are pleading with us, don't go so fast. Among those opposing or having expressed serious concern about this bill, and I support the Conyers substitute, but I rise in opposition to this bill. Those expressing concern about this Innovation Act, Association of American Universities, Council of Education, Association of American Medical Colleges, the Eagle Forum, Club for Growth, the American Bar Association, the Patent Office Professional Association, Judicial Conference Committee on Rules and Practices and Procedures. Our judges are absolutely opposed to this. And yet we get this idea, oh, we'll just take away the rights of the little guy to have his day in court. Doesn't make any difference. That's not what our judges say. American Intellectual Property Association, National Association for Patent Practitioners. And I would ask permission to have this list placed in the record at this moment. Please, let's not rush into a move that will destroy our independent inventors and our innovators in America.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman's request is covered by general leave. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized to close. Gentleman has 2 minutes remaining.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself the balance of my time. Yes, there's some problem with patent trolls. Tens of billions of dollars a year in problems with patent trolls. 55% of all the demand letters that are sent by these patent trolls go to small businesses. There are serious problems that require real patent litigation reform, and I'm proud that this bipartisan bill, supported by many members on both sides of the aisle, supported by the administration, and supported by hundreds of organizations that are listed right here, come by the desk and you can see the huge list of organizations, conservatives, all across the political spectrum, support this legislation. American inventors have led the world for centuries. This bill holds true to the Constitution, our founders, and our promise to future generations that America will continue to lead the world as a fountain for discovery, innovation, economic growth, and job creation. I stand in strong opposition to this substitute amendment, and I urge my colleagues to vote for the underlying bill and yield back my time.
Time having expired, the question is on the amendment from the gentleman from Texas, gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Conyers. All those in favor will say aye. All those opposed, nay. The opinion of the chair, the nays have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
Speaker, may I have a recorded vote?
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Michigan will be postponed. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, proceedings will now resume on those amendments printed in Part A of House Report 113-283, on which further proceedings were postponed in the following order. Amendment number 1 by Mr. Goodlatte of Virginia. Amendment number 2 by Mr. Watt of North Carolina. Amendment number 4 by Mr. Massey of Kentucky. Amendment number 5 by Ms. Jackson Lee of Texas. Amendment number 7 by Mr. Rohrbacher of California. And Amendment number 8 by Mr. Conyers of Michigan. The chair will reduce to 2 minutes the minimum time for any electronic vote after the first vote in the series. The unfinished business is the request for recorded vote on Amendment number 1, printed in Part A of House Report 113-283 by the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Goodlatte, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment numbered 1, printed in Part A of House Report number 113-283, offered by Mr. Goodlatte of Virginia.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote.
The House started work today at 9 o'clock Eastern. This is their last legislative day of the week. They've been working on a bill that would impose new rules governing patent infringement lawsuits. Specifically, the bill would attempt to discourage patent holders who seek to profit from filing lawsuits and forcing defendants into quick settlements. They've been working through a number of amendments as well. Amendment votes here. This first one by Robert Goodlatte of Virginia, chairman of the Judiciary Committee. He has an amendment that would make a number of technical and clarifying changes to the legislation, including lengthening the amount of time for studies and reports. 15-minute vote. The following amendment votes will be 2-minute votes. So this is the last legislative day of the week for the House on this Thursday, but they will be back next week. Speaker Boehner saying today that the House will definitely recess next Friday until 2014. Politico writing that puts pressure on budget negotiators to wrap up a deal. Speaker Boehner said that he's, quote, made it clear that the House is going to leave next Friday. Meanwhile, Representative Paul Ryan and Patty Murray, the chairs of the budget committees, and their aides will work through the weekend to get a deal, according to sources quoted by Politico. They say that Ryan and Murray are trying to hash out an agreement to set spending levels for 2014 and 2015 and replace sequester spending cuts. We're going to show you Speaker Boehner's briefing, which just wrapped up a short while ago, as this 15-minute vote continues.
Morning, everyone.
You know, yesterday President Obama gave a speech about all the problems in the economy under President Obama. It was a clear indication that the President himself believes that his stewardship has been a failure. There's no doubt that under President Obama our country has fallen into what I'll call a new normal. Slow economic growth, high unemployment, stagnant wages. Listen, the President's more focused on increasing reliance on government programs than pro-growth policies that would create more American jobs and better American wages. Republicans continue to focus on strengthening the economy for middle-class families. That's why we've passed nearly 150 bills in this Congress. Many of them would help our economy. They're still sitting in the United States Senate. 150 bills still sitting over in the Senate. You know, Senate Democrats and the President continue to stand in the way of America's priorities. The President's health care law continues to wreak havoc on American families, small businesses, and our economy. People are losing the health insurance they like, losing the doctors they've always relied on, and if it could be worse, they're paying much higher prices as a result. And to make matters worse, American taxpayers could be on the hook for millions of dollars of fraud. You know, this week the White House announced it won't even attempt to verify whether individuals are eligible for subsidies. Instead, the White House is going to give taxpayer dollars to the insurance companies and hand out these subsidies under a so-called honor system. So they're essentially telling taxpayers, just trust us. You won't lose a dime. I don't know why any American would trust this government after all the broken promises they've already seen in Obamacare. Listen, Americans have every right to be concerned about this fundamentally flawed law. House Republicans are going to continue to listen to the American people and to follow their priorities.
On the issue of Obamacare, Mr. Speaker, before the break, you publicly announced that you signed up for Obamacare, despite all of its flaws and mismanagement of the law.
And the 3 or 4 hours I spent trying to sign up.
Indeed. But you succeeded eventually. You're 64 years old, eligible for Medicare next year, so why not pay the penalty in Whittier?
Well, the thought crossed my mind. My health insurance premiums are going to double. My co-pays and deductibles triple under Obamacare. I'm thrilled to death, as you can tell.
So why didn't you read there?
Mr. Speaker, what is your sort of drop-dead deadline here to make a determination? I know you want to give Paul Ryan and Patty Murray room to reach an agreement, but to say, okay, we might have to do a CR. I know there was a letter by a group of conservatives that went to you this morning. Also on the farm bill, if you have to say, okay, we have to cry uncle and maybe just do a dairy extension to get that. What is your deadline with those two things in the next week?
Well, I'm hopeful that Paul Ryan and Patty Murray will come to a budget agreement that can pass both the House and the Senate. Paul Ryan came in today, gave us an update on where they were. I'm hopeful that they'll be able to work this out, but there's clearly no agreement. On the Farm Bill, you know, I've not seen any real progress on the Farm Bill. And so if we've got to pass a 1-month extension of the Farm Bill, I think we'll be prepared to do that.
Would it be for the entire Farm Bill or specific to dairy?
I'll let the chairman answer that question, but I think all of it probably ought to be extended for a month. Listen, I made it clear that the House is going to leave next Friday. And you all know me pretty well. I mean what I say, and I say what I mean.
Speaker Boehner, a few blocks away from here, there's some families that are doing Fast for Families about immigration reform. As we speak right now, there's some children of immigrants who are protesting in members' offices. Will the House GOP allow for an immigration reform bill to go to the floor next year? What would it look like? And are you guys losing the moral argument on this issue right now?
So I have talked for 13 months, since the day after the last presidential election, about the need for Congress to tackle this very important issue. I've been committed to it. I'm still committed to it. I've also made clear that dealing with a 1,300-page bill that no one's read is a non-starter for us. We're going to try to do this in a common-sense, step-by-step approach. And I've got members on both sides of the aisle that have been working together in a diligent fashion to try to lay out a process for dealing with this very difficult issue in an upfront, straightforward, common sense, step-by-step approach.
Are you confident it'll be done in 2014, though?
Listen, I've learned a long time ago from this podium not to make a lot of predictions.
In 2014 overall, how bold do you expect the agenda to be? Whether on jobs, on a health care plan, a real alternative, what do you want to see on the floor?
Listen, the biggest concern for the American people is the economy. We're not creating enough jobs. We're not creating higher wages. I would argue that the President's policies are getting in the way of our economy growing. That's why the House has passed all of these bills this year focused on getting the economy moving again. And so our number one focus will continue to be on the economy. Secondly, I would say our focus also has to be on protecting the American people from Obamacare. You know, we have passed bill after bill trying to protect the American people from this disaster, whether it's the repeal of the bill, whether it's a one-year delay of the individual mandate, whether you get on the whole long list of bills that we've passed, all of them rejected by Democrats here in the House and Senate. So protecting the American people from Obamacare will be another priority.
Mr. Speaker, why do you oppose extending these additional weeks of unemployment benefits that have been awarded the last several years?
If the President has a plan for extending unemployment benefits, I'd surely entertain taking a look at it. But I would argue the President's real focus ought to be creating a better environment for our economy and creating more jobs for the American people. That's where the focus is, not more government programs.
The deal that Patty Murray and Paul Ryan are closing in on would raise to a certain level.
For some reason why I didn't shave today?
Yeah. Would raise discretionary spending above sequester level and would have some fees to offset the cost of that. Is that a framework that you can accept and you think that the Republican conference can accept?
I'm hopeful that Chairman Ryan and Senator Murray will be able to come to an agreement. I haven't seen the agreement. We'll wait and see what it looks like.
Mr. Speaker, what advice do you and other Republican leaders give to your members when they're going up against women candidates and, frankly, when they're trying to appeal to women voters?
Oh, I try to get them to be a little more sensitive. You know, you look around the Congress, there are a lot more females in the Democrat caucus than there are in the Republican caucus. And, you know, some of our members just aren't as sensitive as they ought to be.
Do you think they're making progress on that front?
I do.
Do you think, leaving Obama aside, that those extra weeks of unemployment insurance should be extended?
If the President's got a proposal, I'll look at it.
But do you think so, not the President?
I'm not the expert. Talk to the Chairman of the Ways and Means Committee.
Mr. Speaker, there are at least two openly gay Republican candidates for the House. Do you support the party apparatus supporting them both in money and in a name?
I do. I do.
Mr. Speaker, a group of Democratic leaders will be detailing later today the authority they believe that the President has to suspend the deportations. Do you believe or do you think that the President has that authority? And if he were to do that, how it will affect the debate here in the Congress? And also, what do you...
Listen, the President has an obligation, just like I do, and we take an oath, to uphold and defend the laws in the United States. And if the law is clear that people have violated the law, they should receive the punishment that's outlined in the law.
Last question. Mr. Speaker, the CBO the other week reported that TRICARE premiums for people in the military ranged somewhere between 16 to 19% of similar insurance premiums in the private sector for HMOs and PPOs. And yet, if you guys go ahead with this deal that Ryan and I were talking about, defense will be held harmless from sequester cuts in 2014. Why not look to an area like TRICARE for cuts?
I think everything's on the table in these conversations, as it should be. Thanks.
Were you watching the Ohio State game?
I'll be watching.
House Speaker John Boehner and his briefing from earlier today. We will also later today cover the briefing of the Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi. This is the first of 6 amendment votes on the House floor to a patent litigation bill. Bob Goodlatte of Virginia. His amendment would make a number of technical and clarifying changes to the bill, a bill that would impose new rules governing patent infringement lawsuits. And again, 6 amendment votes. This first one is 15. The following 5 will be 2-minute votes. On the economy, White House Budget Director Sylvia Burwell says she's cautiously optimistic about a budget deal getting done between the Budget Committee Chair, House Representative Paul Ryan, and Senator Patty Murray, who reportedly will meet this weekend on the budget deal. Ms. Burwell also stressed getting rid of the sequester is an important parameter for the White House. She spoke yesterday at the Politico's Women Rule Series Summit in Washington. She also talked about balancing her family life and her work, and we'll show you some of her comments as this vote continues.
Welcome to you. Welcome to all the people who are watching on the live stream. We appreciate it. Thank you for this great morning. We appreciate our Politico colleagues who've made this possible, and Google and the Tory Burch Foundation. This has been such a fantastic program. We've loved the Women Rule series, so thank you for being here with us. We're very honored to have with us Sylvia Burwell, who's the director of the White House Office of Management and Budget, who knows 2 worlds intimately. She knows global philanthropy. After she left the Clinton administration, she worked for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and for the Walmart Foundation. And she knows government. And we were just talking backstage. You were one of the few people that was in the Clinton administration for every day. So 8 years. What did you tell about it? Had 4 jobs there, including Deputy Chief of Staff to the President, where she traveled around the world with him, and Deputy Director of OMB, and she was also at Treasury. We were just chatting about running, and while you were traveling with President Clinton, you accidentally ran a half marathon. Tell us how you do that.
Well, it was one of the trips, and then the trips, you know, just trying to work in a bit of exercise was always a difficult thing, and I decided I would go out for a run. I'd gotten things to a point where I thought I could go out for a run, and we were in the countryside in England, and so it wasn't like it was marked paths, and so I ended up going out on some country road, and I got lost. And I kept looking at my watch because I knew I had to be back, actually, for a meeting.
The motorcade doesn't even wait for you.
No, the motorcade does not wait. And so I just had to keep running and running and running and trying to flag down cars to ask them which way I should go to get back to where I was going. So I ended up in the end, that's the longest I've ever run. And it was not intentional. It was not an intentional distance. I like shorter distances. But yes, that is... when you have to get back to the meeting, and you're a little lost, that makes you just keep going, keep going.
All right, I guess we should get down to business. While we're talking here, please tweet us your questions at #WomenRule. Now, Director Burwell, at the very moment that we're talking, the President is talking over at the Center for American Progress. He's talking about 2 things, growing income inequality and shrinking economic mobility. What is economic mobility?
Economic mobility, I think maybe the best way to talk about economic mobility is maybe to even reflect on my own story, which is, you know, I am a 2nd-generation immigrant. So all 4 of my grandparents came from Greece, 8th grade education, for some, you know, limited, and came to this country, and then I've had all the opportunities I've had. And so that mobility that this nation affords us, the fact that, you know, just my grandparents came here as immigrants, and I have the opportunity to work with the President and work on the issues that I've worked on, go to the institutions that I've attended for school, participate and try
Harvard, Oxford, she didn't mention that.
Participate in the things that I have. That's the economic mobility that is the hallmark of this nation. The fact that no matter where you're born, you can change. And, you know, we've seen it in our presidents, and I've been fortunate to see it in the 2 presidents I've had the chance to work for. That economic mobility, that it didn't matter if you were born in Hope, Arkansas, or you were born, you know, and traveled to Hawaii and a number of different places, you could be the leader of our country, and you can do anything. You can be a CEO. You look at so many of our CEOs in this country and their backgrounds, and that's what that economic mobility is about, and that's stagnated That has changed in our country, and it's changed over a number of decades, and it's a very serious issue for us as a nation, and that's why the President's highlighting it today. It's what keeps us strong, it's what keeps us innovative, it is what brings new and fresh blood and change and ideas, and it's a part of what is the strength of our nation economically and in other ways in terms of the ideas we generate. So the President today is going to spend time speaking about why that is happening and looking forward to the things we can do, and growth in the economy is one of the most important things we can do, but growth that spreads throughout the economy. And so that's what the President will be speaking about today. He'll focus on issues like education is an important part of that, issues like minimum wage, issues like health care that afford people the opportunity to actually have productive lives. Many of the people without health care today are working people raising families. And that constraint, and that's what the Affordable Care Act is about, that constraint holds them back and holds our economy back. And so that's what he'll talk about today.
Now, it seems a little bit like Charlie Brown and the football, but our congressional reporters tell us that there really is going to be a budget deal this time, that the House Budget Chairman Paul Ryan, the Senate Budget Chairman Patty Murray, who came back to D.C. a week early this week to work on it, are going to reach some sort of a small deal mid-month so that reporters and lawmakers and budget directors are not working on New Year's Eve again. So I have to ask you, have you been briefed on the Murray-Ryan conversations?
So right now we're very excited to have a return to what might be called the beginnings of regular order, or the fact that the Congress actually works together to do the budget process. We submit a budget and then they act on it. And though it has happened in a different way to get to this point, we're excited and happy to be at this point, and certainly staying in close touch and being supportive of the process. Right now, I think what the administration can best do to help us get that ball over the line so we don't have another Charlie Brown situation is be supportive of the process and supportive of the effort that Ms. Murray and Mr. Ryan are doing, supportive of that effort, and being clear about the principles that we have so that everyone knows. And we've been clear about those throughout this entire conversation. So continuing to be clear and supporting the process. And that is what we're doing, and doing that by staying in touch as appropriate and as we have throughout the entire process, which began before I actually even came back to the Office of Management and Budget.
Now, the specifics are being worked out, but it's pretty clear the gist of this deal, and that is going to be to set some spending top line so you can have this regular order, to change some of the sequester cuts. Right now they're all aimed at defense, to sort of move those around a little bit, and no big new taxes, no which Democrats want, no big changes in entitlements, which Republicans want. Does that gist sound like something the President could accept?
So I think, speaking to what you can and can't accept, you need to see the specifics of anything before you know what you can and can't. We continue to stay in close touch, and you know, the Democrats, I think, are pretty unified in terms of the things that are most important. And one of the most important things, which will be a framing concept to what it is you would accept, is we believe at this stage of the economic recovery, we're recovering. It's gaining steam. We're getting there. But what we want to do is have this agreement be a part of what can further support economic growth and job creation. And the way we believe that needs to happen is you need to replace sequester, which are cuts to what's called discretionary spending, and that's the spending that government does. It's infrastructure, it's education, it's
just do them as you get them. Mr. Meadows votes aye. Mr. Garcia votes aye. Mr. Duffy votes aye. Mr. Carson of Indiana votes no. Ms. Waters votes no. Mr. Berra. Off no on aye for Mr. Berra. Mr. Sessions. Mr. Sessions votes aye. Ms. Shea Porter. Ms. Shea Porter votes no. Mr. Hall. Off no on aye for Mr. Hall. Ms. DeLauro. Ms. DeLauro votes no. Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones voted no. Mr. Rokita. Off no on aye for Mr. Rokita.
Have all members voted?
Mr. Gosar. Off no on aye for Mr. Gosar. Ms. Carolyn Maloney of New York. Ms. Carolyn Maloney of New York votes aye. Mr. Higgins. Off no on aye for Mr. Higgins. Mr. Meeks. Off no on aye for Mr. Meeks. Mr. Al Green of Texas. Off no on aye for Mr. Al Green of Texas. Ms. Spear. Ms. Spear votes no.
On this vote, the yeas are 341, the nays are 73. The amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is a request for recorded vote on amendment number 2, printed in Part A of House Report 113-283 by the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Watt, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 2, printed in Part A of House Report number 113-283, offered by Mr. Watt of North Carolina.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. Sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Remember, record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
It's the second of 6 amendment votes on a bill that would impose new rules governing patent infringement lawsuits. Specifically, it attempts to discourage patent holders who seek to profit from filing lawsuits and forcing defendants into quick settlements. Under the measure, patent holders would be required to provide more details as to how their products or services are allegedly being infringed It would also shift the cost of litigation, requiring the losing party to pay the other side's fees. The White House announced this week its support for the bill, saying it would, quote, improve incentives for future innovation while protecting the overall integrity of the patent system. That's from the White House. This is an amendment by Democratic Congressman Mel Watt of North Carolina, which would allow courts to reduce or deny awarding court costs to a prevailing party if it's determined that the party protracted a final resolution of the case. By the way, Congressman Watt's nomination could come up on the Senate floor next week. He was nominated a number of months ago by the President to head the Federal Housing Finance Agency. CQ writes that Senate Democrats hope to clear 4 nominees who were blocked in the last 2 months, as well as selections of Janet Yellen to head the Federal Reserve, Jay Johnson to head the Homeland Security Department before heading out for the holidays. CQ says this may require keeping the Senate in session through December 20th, a prospect under tentative discussion, according to senior Senate Democratic aides who stressed that no final decision on that schedule has been made. The Senate is scheduled already to confirm December 9th the nomination of Patricia Ann Millett to fill a vacancy on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit. And CQ writes that after the confirmation vote on Millett, the Senate could move to revisit the nomination of Representative Mel Watt, who's been, as we said, nominated by the President to head the Federal Housing Finance Agency.
On this vote, the yeas are 199, the nays are 213. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is a request for recorded vote on amendment number 4, printed in Part A of House Report 113-283 by the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Massey, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 4, printed in Part A of House Report number 113-283, offered by Mr. Massey of Kentucky.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
The underlying bill would impose new rules governing patent infringement lawsuits. 6 amendment votes. This is the third of the 6 amendment votes. Congressman Thomas Massey, Republican of Kentucky, an electrical engineer and the holder of several patents himself, has an amendment that would strike the section of the bill dealing with lawsuits against customer end users.
this vote, the yeas are 118, the nays...
Off ion no for Ms. Gabbard. Ms. Spear. Off no, on aye for Ms. Spear.
On this vote, the yeas are 119, the nays are 296. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is the request for recorded vote on Amendment Number 5, printed in Part A of House Report 113-283 by the gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the ayes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment Number 5, printed in Part A of House Report Number 113-283, offered by Ms. Jackson Lee of Texas.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of a request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas offered 2 amendments to the patent infringement lawsuit bill. The House voice voted approval of one of them. This amendment is one that would indemnify small businesses with annual revenue of less than $25 million from lawsuits against customer end users. Another 2-minute vote. Speaker John Boehner held his briefing a short while ago. The Hill writes that he downplayed the likelihood of imminent agreements on the budget and the farm bill, 2 major items that leaders hope to resolve by the end of the year. The House is in next week. Speaker saying next Friday will be the last legislative day of the year. We'll hear from the Democratic leader, Nancy Pelosi, at 2 p.m. Eastern. You can follow that live on cspan.org. Meanwhile, the White House today is pushing Congress to extend jobless benefits to long-term unemployed Americans. The argument is that if benefits don't get renewed by the end of the month, more than 1 million people will lose the assistance, which will slow economic growth. The Associated Press says the government released a report today saying Congress has renewed benefits when unemployment was lower than the current 7.3%. New unemployment figures are due out this Friday.
Vote. The ayes are 144, the nays. On this vote, the yeas are 144, the nays are 266. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is a request for recorded vote on Amendment Number 7, printed in Part A of House Report 113-283 by the gentleman from California, Mr. Rohrbacher, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment Number 7, printed in Part A of House Report Number 113-283, offered by Mr. Rohrbacher of California.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
The bill came out of the Judiciary Committee with just 5 members opposing it. It's a bill that would impose new rules governing patent infringement lawsuits. It had a number of opponents from the Republican side, supporters from the Democratic side. One of those opponents from the Republican side was Dana Rohrbacher of California, offering an amendment instead that would strike the provision in the bill that repeals provisions in current law that currently allow patent applicants who face rejection by the Patent and Trademark Office to file a civil action in district court rather than the U.S. Court of Appeals. A 2-minute vote. One more amendment vote is coming up. That's on the substitute by Ranking Member Conyers.
On this vote, the yeas are 260, the nays are 156. The amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is the request for recorded vote on amendment number 8, printed in Part A of House Report 113-283 by the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Conyers, on which further proceedings are postponed and on which the noes prevail by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute numbered 8, printed in Part A of House Report number 113-283, offered by Mr. Conyers of Michigan.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
And this final amendment vote, this is the substitute amendment, which would entirely change the bill under consideration, imposing new rules governing patent infringement lawsuits. Final passage on that bill coming up.
On this vote, the ayes are 157, the nays are 258. The amendment is not adopted. Question is on the amendment, the nature of a substitute as amended. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. Accordingly, under the rule, the committee rises. Mr. Chairman. The Chair of the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union reports that the committee has had under consideration the bill H.R. 3309 and pursuant to House Resolution 429 reports the bill back to the House with an amendment adopted in the Committee of the Whole. Under the rule, the previous question is ordered. Is a separate vote demanded on any amendment to the amendment reported from the Committee of the Whole? If not, the question is on adoption of the amendment in the nature of a substitute as amended. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The question is on engrossment and third reading of the bill. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
A bill to amend Title 35, United States Code, and the Leahy-Smith America Invents Act to make improvements and technical corrections and for other purposes.
The question is on passage of the bill. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is passed.
No.
Gentleman from Michigan.
Mr. Speaker, on this I ask for a record vote.
The gentleman from Michigan requests a recorded vote. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, this 5-minute vote on the passage of the bill will be followed by a 5-minute vote on the question on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal if ordered. This is a 5-minute vote.
Final passage vote on the patent litigation bill. Specifically, it imposes new rules governing patent infringement lawsuits. The White House earlier this week announced its support for the bill, saying it would, quote, improve incentives for future innovation while protecting the overall integrity of the patent system. The bill attempts to discourage patent holders who seek to profit from filing lawsuits and forcing defendants into quick settlements. If it passes the House today, the Senate Judiciary is expected to consider the measure before the end of the year.
On this vote, the yeas are 325, the nays are 91. The bill is passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the question on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the Journal, which the Chair will put de novo. The question is on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the Journal. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. The Journal stands approved.
Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that my name be removed as co-sponsor of HRES 417.
Without objection, so
Thank you.
ordered.